Good night, Tyler.
So thanks everyone for coming to our second meeting of the Career Connections Club. Today we have Ava Wallace, who's actually a Blair alumni. She was the EIC of Summer Tips Online when she was at Blair. Now she works at the Washington Post as a sports writer. So everyone give a hand for Ava.
Do you guys have, how should I just start talking? That might be bad if I just start talking.
I think we should kind of give an overview of your experience in high school and then how you got your career, and then maybe they could ask you questions.
Cool. Okay, yeah. So like Laura said, I obviously went to school here. I started really liking journalism because we had to take a journalism class in that program, and they have that journalism class open to everyone now, right?
I believe so.
Everyone take journalism. It's very fun. Yeah, so that's how I kind of got into the field and realized I liked it. And when I was looking at colleges, I was looking for schools that had a good media program and a journalism program. So I ended up at Northwestern outside of Chicago, which has a good journalism school, and it was nice to get off the East Coast. And in that program in college, you have to take time off of school. You actually do an internship, or two. You have to do one summer and one fall semester, basically, to go out and actually work and not be in classes, which is so much better than being in classes. Yay! And so that's how I kind of got my first experience. I worked at papers, in addition to writing on the school paper. I wrote sports for the Daily Northwestern. Also, I went to Arizona to work at one of their papers out there in Phoenix, and I worked at the Miami Herald down in South Florida, and got an internship at USA Today out of college. And from there, I applied to the job post, and that's how I got to back to DC, I guess. Yeah. So it was a lot of in school writing as much as I could for the school paper, and then just kind of taking whatever internships would have me. That's it. This was very easy. Sounds so much easier than it actually was when I say it like that. Yeah. For anybody, I guess, I don't know, for what you think you want to do or think you have interest in college, I would say just find extracurriculars that are going to help you be able to do that once you get out of school, even if that's getting out of high school or college. So, you know, staying involved in clubs like this, or finding a class that you think would relate to your interests. It sounds obvious, but that's the only way you can, I don't know, get started in doing what you want to do. School is good. Yeah. Cool. Oh, okay, so my job now, I guess I should tell you about that. I am one of our college basketball writers at the Post Sports on our sports desk. So I cover Virginia, Virginia Tech, and the ACC. And so yeah, that means I cover football and basketball and kind of any other sports that are thrown in there. Like Virginia's really good at baseball. They won the College World Series a couple years ago. So in June I have to do some baseball writing, which is not fun because games are 4 hours long. But it's basically any sports that are going on at those schools, any news that comes out of those two schools. That's kind of like my domain. And then once it becomes March, as it did yesterday, everything is awful, and March Madness starts, and you have to be pulled in a million different directions. But usually it's just going to games a couple times a week, talking to college kids who are very tall, writing in a face off like that. It's very fun. And sometimes hard, but mainly fun. So that's good. Good job, I think. I don't know, this is my first job. I think that's good. Good job, right? Hard and fun. Yeah. What are you guys interested in? Anybody interested in journalism? Anybody interested in watching sports all the time and getting paid for it?
Yeah. So because did you play sports? Were you already into sports, or just how you just ended up there because you got a job?
Yeah, so I have always been a sports fan. I always played sports. I played lacrosse and tennis here and ran track, and I didn't actually know that I wanted to do sports when I was at the paper in college, kind of experimenting, writing a bunch of different types of stories. And in the Midwest, Northwestern has a really good women's lacrosse program. They had won 7 national championships in a row, but it was a bunch of kids from the Midwest on the paper, and no one knew how to cover women's lacrosse. And so I was like, I'm from Maryland, I will do that. And so as like my first story, I was like, oh, this is the most fun I've ever had writing anything or like learning about anything. So just kind of like after that, it totally clicked, and I was like, sports is the way to go.
So as you expand your career in the future, do you still see yourself as a sports writer, or like what kind of writer do you want to be?
Yeah, Yeah, that's a good question, especially because at a paper like the Washington Post, you have the opportunity to kind of I could stay at that paper unless I get fired, which I really hope I don't get fired. And people stay there until, their entire careers. It's not a paper that you necessarily need to move away from, like, just because it's so big and it's one of the kind of most prominent papers. So there's a lot of movement between, like, us and the Wall Street Journal and the Times, but not really outside of that realm. So it is something I ponder. I kind of sat down at my desk for the first time when I was 22 and I was like, I could be here for 50 years, like maybe. But yeah, I do for now. I really enjoy sports writing, and that is kind of where I see myself. Of course, the thing about sports writing is you start out covering a beat. That's what they call it. So like Virginia Tech is then the ACC. That's my beat. And it's kind of the upward mobility there is you get to write about wider stories and bigger stories. You get to cover like an Olympics or an NBA finals or something like that, and then you can write columns. So it's nice that there's a lot of different options. If I want to be a sports writer, I don't necessarily just have to write about games for the rest of my life. Like I can cover a bunch of different things within that field, and that's why sports writing is very cool because you get to write about anything you want. You can write about religion and family stories and the economy and everything. It's just about athletes' lives instead of which is cool. Athletes are nice. Hockey players are the nicest athletes. Just a pro tip, yeah.
Well, when you were writing in college for like lots of different things other than sports writing, like what was your favorite like topic to write about other than sports?
Other than sports, I really liked writing features on people. So if like there was someone prominent coming to campus to speak, that was always the most interesting to me, to call people from their background and talk to that specific person, kind of get to tell their story. And I really like doing that still now. Like I get a lot of opportunity to write, I guess, profiles on like coaches and people who kind of have an unexpected role, I guess, on their team. But that's what I really liked doing. I really liked feature writing. So it was like, you get to be a little wordier, you get to really get to know someone, and that was really fun. It was time-consuming and fun. But yeah, that's what I liked. Go for it.
Also, if hockey players are the nicest athletes, which are like, what's on the other end of the spectrum?
So I guess I should say of the like big four sports. So hockey, baseball, football, and basketball. Hockey players are nice because they're all from the Midwest and like Canada, and they're like, of course I have a right to talk to you, which is just like not what athletes usually say. They're like, fine, you can ask me one question. But hockey players are super nice, and I know because so after the college season ends in spring. It's kind of all hands on deck with teams that are in the playoffs. So I'll do a lot of Caps coverage and Wizards coverage in the spring after basketball. And the Wizards are nice too, but the Caps are nicer. Who do you think is on the other end of the spectrum? What's your guess?
Among those big four?
Yeah. Without, stereotyping anyone too poor. Baseball players.
Baseball players are the meanest? They're weird?
Well, so all athletes are weird because like most professional athletes spend their entire lives in locker rooms with people who are just like them, who can understand their lives. But baseball players, something about being in the dugouts by the time you were like 12 just messes up your worldview.
Do you have like an example or anything?
So, not softball players. Softball players, of course. That's the other thing. Like women athletes, I'm just like, yes, I love you guys. You're articulate. You want to talk to me. You're so much fun. But yeah, baseball players are a little fun.
Do you have any examples of baseball players being weird that like makes you say that?
So baseball players are all athletes are superstitious, but baseball players are just like the most set in their ways. It's like you never get to talk to pitchers on the days that they're pitching, which is kind of silly. It's like you're the most important part. I guess fine, I won't talk to you, sure. But so like different clubs, like something the Nats do a lot is they'll have like huge crossword tournaments because the dugout is open for hours before the game, so you can just walk up and talk to anybody unless they have a crossword in front of them, and that's like absolutely taboo to approach anyone who's doing a crossword puzzle. And so if you do that, they will absolutely just ignore you until you walk away, and it's not great for dignity, really.
That's weird.
Yeah, it's just little things like that where they're all kind of set in their ways and do not like to be interrupted on game day, even though how could talking to me for 2 minutes really throw off your pitching game? Max Scherzer, but whatever. Yeah.
Do you ever cover any sports outside of the Big Four, or is that what you're
Yeah, so I actually started out, what I was doing at USA Today before I got hired at the Post was I was on their Olympics desk. That was a year before Rio, and they were kind of making sure they were in a good position. Had been talking to all the athletes so that when we got down in Brazil, people knew who we were. We weren't just walking up to them for the first time and asking to share their life stories and hopes and dreams. I love covering Olympic sports, and that's kind of what in college terminology, it's called non-revenue sports, so anything that's not football, basically, sometimes basketball, depending on how good that school's team is. Those are my favorite things to do. I just find the stories a little bit more compelling. You get a more diverse group of people to talk to in terms of where they're coming from, and it's cool, and not many people cover Olympic sports, so it's nice to have a niche. It's kind of like what I did in college. It's like nobody knows how to cover, like Olympic badminton or fencing. I love knowing about that stuff because it makes you indispensable and they can't get rid of you. It's very niche. But it's just cool to have a niche.
Yeah. How structured is your work day?
So I go into the office maybe once a week. Because I usually am working from wherever I'm covering the game. So whether that's Charlottesville, where Virginia is, or Blacksburg, where Virginia Tech is, or wherever they're playing. So during the basketball season, I'm probably in DC like 3 nights a week, and I'm on the road the rest of the time traveling with the team. So I work from wherever they work from, and sports don't really happen in the morning, which is awesome because I'm not a morning person. So usually my work day is probably from like anywhere between 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. to like midnight to 2 a.m. So I do not have a normal sleep schedule, which is pretty typical of beat writers. But the day is structured in that whenever I have a game, I know the day before I have a game, I'm going to have a story kind of advancing what's going on, telling people what they need to know about the team. After the game, I have a gamer, and then in between, I'll write the features or other stories. So it's structured more around the team's schedule than it is the paper's schedule. The paper's always there, but teams do whatever they want, whenever. But it is pretty flexible, which is nice. Like, I'm able to come hang out with you guys for 2 hours during the day, which is very nice. And then going into the office, it's kind of, I only go in when I don't have that much work to do. I guess I shouldn't have said that while I was filming, but I do that.
We won't
just
show
to,
your boss.
Talk to my colleagues and fellow reporters and kind of pick their brains, because I am still pretty new at this, so it's really nice. I sit around a lot of our features writers, and they call it takeout writers because they write stories that are so long you can just, they're 2 full pages in the newspaper, so you can just lift them out. And a lot of our Redskins beat writers. So whenever I'm in, I'm talking to them and asking them what I can do about features, and just trying to squeeze as much advice as I can out of people who've been doing this for a lot longer than I have.
How long does it take you to write an article? Start with thinking the idea, finish getting it to the paper?
So thinking of the idea takes the longest for me, just because I have to think about what is newsworthy right now, like what readers should know about the team that I'm covering, and it also depends on who I can get to talk to me and things like that. So the idea takes a little bit longer, but if I have an idea, and obviously the next step is getting quotes and talking to people relevant for that. After all that's done, my writing process for a normal, advance, a game preview would probably take me 2 to 3 hours to write, depending on how long it is. When I'm writing gamers, I'm writing on deadline the whole time. So I have to write what we call a runner, which is literally just running action of what's going on in the game, and file that, send that into my bosses as soon as the game ends, which is really awful sometimes because it's like, I was on Twitter the other day during the Oscars, and all these culture writers are like, oh my gosh, this just happened, I have to rewrite this whole story, and I'm like, aha, I do that 2 times a week when overtime happens. So that can be pretty stressful, but so I'll file that right at the end, and then I go talk to everybody after the game, and I have to file a whole nother story an hour and a half later. So it kind of depends on the different type of story you're writing, but you are always on deadline, pretty much. Our off-day deadlines, you have to get your stories in by 4 p.m. So the paper can close on time, and then it's usually an hour and a half after games. I'm a slow writer also. Like for breaking news, that'll take a long time, which is why they don't make me write much breaking news. Lower expectations. Yeah.
Was it easy to find a job?
No. It is not easy to find a job in journalism, although journalism is definitely not dying, even though a lot of people say that. It's difficult to find a job just because there are so many good people who like to write, and there are so many places, so they have their pick of the litter. Like here in DC, one of my friends from college is looking for a job, so she's applying to CNN and Politico and the Washington Post and the New York Times Washington Bureau, but so is everyone else. So you have to be exactly what they're looking for, basically. And that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It's just it's all about timing. So the way I got my job I was at USA Today and was kind of just chugging along there, and our old Capitals hockey beat writer took a job at Sports Illustrated as a magazine writer. So that bumped the woman who was in my job up to that position, so there was an opening. And I applied for the post internship 3 times and never got it. And I would stalk all their interns on Twitter and just be mad at them, which was very fun. And so I was like, what the heck, I might as well send an application. They kind of know who I am at this point. And they were just like, sure, well, come give it a try. So it was all about timing. I'd never gotten so much as an email back from them before. But I happened to be who they were looking for and had my skill set. And so yeah, it just can take a lot of time. It can be, the hardest part is that it's frustrating to hear no. And then once you get over that, it's fine. And you will get over that because you'll hear no a lot. But that's, I think, the same in any job. You just gotta pick your spots.
You go, Laura.
So since you're covering a lot of the same teams like throughout the season, like I guess 2 questions. Do they know who you are at this point, and how do you come up with new story ideas to not keep it mean at all?
Yeah, 2 really, yes, they definitely know who I am. It would be very upsetting if they didn't. It'd make me very sad. Yeah, that's one of the best parts of beat writing. Beat writing, as opposed to writing features or covering the Olympics or writing about broader topics. My favorite part is that you get to know these kids over a course of sometimes 4 years, which is really awesome to get comfortable with someone enough that they come to you when they have something that they're saying, hey, this is a story about the team that I think you should write, it's important, or that they're comfortable enough with you to say, this is how I'm feeling about this game and why. It's really fun to get to know a bunch of different people from a bunch of different backgrounds who are all kind of going towards the same goal. It almost feels like you're on, to me it feels like I'm back playing on a sports team a lot of the times, which is very fun. And how I come up with ideas is a lot of it is news-based. So Virginia basketball a couple of weeks ago lost 4 games in a row, which hadn't happened in 7 years. So that's something obviously I'm gonna write about. I'm gonna say, how sad are you guys? I did not phrase it like that, but so I'm talking about that streak. So it depends a lot on what the team is actually doing. If there's anything out of the ordinary happening like that, and then it's basically, a lot of it is news driven. And then features I can have in my back pocket that are based on team relationships, like the Virginia basketball team always has 2 guys, a forward and a guard, who generally work together in tandem as leaders and on the court and off the court, and the off the court part is really important. So that's something that I can write. I wrote it 2 weeks ago, and I can turn it in at any time when I need to fill the paper. So yeah, news driven, and then just getting to know the team helps a lot. Yeah.
So I don't know like how much you've seen. I've looked at like silver chips right now at our school, but I know since you were on it back when you were here, like, can you tell us a bit about like how silver chips was back then, or and maybe like how it changed if you know anything about like
I don't know
now,
that much now. So what's it like? How often does, so you still have online?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
how often does the print edition come out? Yeah. Okay. So that's how it was in my time. Also, I hope that much hasn't changed. That would make me feel very old.
Yeah.
I wasn't that familiar with the print side. For online, we had editors for each section, and we kind of just met for story conference. I forget what we called it. But I don't know how it's changed. Has it changed at all since, like, in your short time being on it?
She's an online.
Cool. Yeah, I don't know. Silver Chips was great. That was so much fun. It was also very much like a real college paper, which I don't know that happens everywhere, but that was definitely an easy transition to just kind of like jump right into the college paper as a freshman.
So you were ESC for online.
Mm-hmm. Yep, just me. There were 2 usually. And I don't think enough people applied my year, and I was like, that's right, you're so I am a dictator now.
Are you going to cover the 2018 Winter Olympics or no?
I will start asking my editor like once a day in a couple months, because right now, no. But if you ask enough, sometimes they need people. No, they usually, for the Olympics, it's such a big deal, and you usually send your most senior writers or writers who have been covering, 8 or 10 Olympics in their time. So we do have kind of a set group of people already ready to go. That is my goal, is I want to cover Olympics someday and be an Olympic writer, which doesn't really exist anymore, but so I will bug them and ask, and the answer will be no, but I can still ask, because sometimes it works. I got to cover the US Open, the tennis, not the golf, one year by just asking a lot. So now I really believe in just pestering people until they get tired enough to send you literally out of town. That's how it works a lot of the time. Yeah.
Yeah, how's like the travel aspect of your job? Because do you like go to, like, I assume like you go to like all the home games and everything for these sports that you cover, but like how much do you like travel to go to?
Yeah,
all
so
those
we are
events?
fortunate enough that we have enough money that I go to all of the games pretty much. So it's a lot of time driving on the road. I'm in North Carolina a lot just because there are 4 ACC schools down there. I love the travel aspect. I really like seeing different parts of the country that I wouldn't necessarily have gotten to otherwise. Like when I go down to Louisville, that's one of my favorite cities. It's really. Are you from there?
I'm not from there.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Are you? Wow. Okay.
Wait, I didn't know that.
But yeah, so I really like that part of it and kind of seeing different cultures that way. But it can get tiring. But no, there's no but. It can get tiring, but it's fun. And not all papers do that. That's definitely like you have to be a big paper to afford a lot of that. So I spend way more time with the other writers from other papers who cover Virginia and Virginia Tech than I do with my Washington Post colleagues. So papers from Roanoke and Richmond and Newport News, those are the old men who I spend all of my time with. And sometimes because they're smaller papers, they might not go to every single trip. But we are very, very fortunate enough to have a budget to send me everywhere. Yeah.
Was Northwestern your dream college? And if so, like what drew you to
I think you could say it was my dream college. It was the only one I applied to because I did early decision, and I had like other backup things, but I got in before I needed to do that. What drew me there, I really liked the idea that they had a really good women's lacrosse team. I just wanted to go out and watch a lot of women's lacrosse games. I was very nerdy like that. And I liked their journalism program, and I really liked that it was in another big city that wasn't on the East Coast. I think my year, I think my graduating class was around 800, and I think like 550 people went to Maryland that year, which is totally great. All of my friends loved Maryland and had a blast, but I definitely wanted to go somewhere else. So just that combination of things. Also, Chicago is really cold, and I visited on the hottest day, like in April in record in Chicago, and I was like, what are they talking about? It's beautiful out here. It's fine. It was not fine. So I was tricked into, no, I really liked Northwestern. Yeah, I guess it was my dream school. Do you have one?
No, I was gonna ask mostly about the same thing, about like whether you like pick like Northwestern for like a journalism program.
Yeah, that was a really big part of it. The journalism program there is really good and fun, and just a big deal to me. It was also a really weird thing because you have to apply to a certain school of Northwestern. Like there are 6 undergraduate schools, so that was a little scary knowing that I was kind of picking what I wanted to do for a lot of college. Luckily, there's more flexibility once you actually get into the school. You can switch, but that was definitely a decision I had to consider. Like, do I want to put all my eggs in this basket? And luckily, it worked out. Are you guys what grades are you in? Are you all?
Mostly juniors, I think.
Are
Some
there seniors?
sophomores. Are there any seniors? I don't think there are any seniors.
This is great. You don't have to think about college.
Oh, no.
Has it started already?
Yes.
What do they have you guys doing now? So it's like this is winter to your junior year. Yeah. What are you doing now in terms of college?
Just did a lot of
Panicking.
Yeah.
No. There's
College
no need to-
visits and stuff.
You have so much time to procrastinate before you can then start. I am still a really bad procrastinator. My deadline literally is the only reason that I'm still a procrastinator. Yeah. Did you have a question?
Is there another publication that you would think about leaving the Washington Post for?
So I'm not thinking about that yet, just because I was hired November 2015, so I've been here for like a year and a half. But there are other publications that I admire that I say, wow, what they're doing